In the ancient kingdom of Valoria, Princess Seraphina, a beloved wielder of life-giving summer magic, is betrayed on the eve of her wedding by her betrothed, Lord Cassian, who lusts for power. Aligning with the banished sorceress Morgana and ancient forces of eternal winter, Cassian helps imprison Seraphina in a remote tower, sealing her voice and magic with cursed chains and a padlock forged by primordial frost wraiths, entities that feed on frozen emotion and broken bonds. Years pass in isolation and torment until Prince Lucian of Etheria, a gentle soul from a land of eternal spring, journeys north following a prophecy that a frozen heart holds the key to restoring balance to the world. Carrying an ancient key, Lucian frees Seraphina from her chains, though not fully from her curse, and tends her wounds within the frozen tower. As weeks turn into months, compassion deepens into desire and then into an intense, consuming love that slowly thaws Seraphina's frozen heart and weakens the curse itself. Their bond becomes a living defiance of the frost wraith's dominion, proving that passion, forgiveness, and love can burn hotter than eternal winter. Interwoven with their story are ancient truths, the origins of the frost wraiths, born from cosmic isolation and sustained by betrayal, and the auroral kin, once beings of perfect balance between fire and ice, whose fall into winter mirrors Valoria's fate. Morgana's curse is revealed to be part of a larger prophecy, one that foretells the destruction of any who imprison a heart of pure flame. The fragile sanctuary shatters when Lucian receives a letter bearing Cassian's seal. He confesses the truth. He was originally sent north as an assassin, deceived by lies that Seraphina was mad and dangerous, meant to kill her if the curse weakened. Though he burned those orders and fell genuinely in love, the final command is clear: finish the task or lose everything. For Seraphina, the revelation is devastating. Betrayed first by ambition, then by love, she retreats into herself, reliving the agony of being chosen for sacrifice. Lucian's love is real, but the wound cuts too deep. The story closes with winter tightening its grip once more, even as prophecy hints that love unbroken may yet become the blade that destroys eternal frost and all who summoned it. The betrayal. In the ancient kingdom of Valoria, where summers once painted the valleys in gold and winters were gentle whispers, lived Princess Seraphina. Her hair fell like pale sunlight, her eyes shone like emeralds in morning dew, and her presence warmed every hall she entered. She was beloved by her people, gifted with an ancient magic that coaxed life from the soil and healed the sick. Her heart belonged to Lord Cassian, a charismatic noble whose silver tongue had won her trust. They were to wed under blossoming cherry trees, but Cassian hungered for the throne. In secret, he struck a pact with Morgana, a banished sorceress whose beauty had faded into bitter envy of Seraphina's radiance. On the eve of the wedding, as Seraphina stood in her chambers admiring her gown, Cassian entered with a smile that masked venom. Morgana followed, cloaked in shadow. Before Seraphina could cry out, dark chains of enchanted iron sprang from the floor, binding her wrists until blood traced crimson veins across her pale skin. A massive padlock, cold and rusted, clamped over her forehead, sealing her voice and her magic in an unbreakable silence. The curse was complete. She would be imprisoned forever in eternal winter, her beauty frozen, her heart locked away. Cassian watched without remorse. "The kingdom will be mine," he whispered, as Morgana transported Seraphina to an impenetrable tower atop the Frostfang Mountains, where snow fell endlessly and no spring dared tread. Chapter 1. The Prisoner in Chains. Years passed, or perhaps centuries, for time lost meaning in the curse. Seraphina hung against the iron door of her subterranean cell deep within the tower's heart. Snow drifted through cracks in the stone, dusting her hair and lashes. The chains bit deeper each day she struggled, her wrists raw and scarred with red rivulets that froze before they could fully bleed. The padlock weighed on her skull like a crown of torment, muting every scream into silence. Her eyes, still bright green, stared into the void. She remembered warmth, Cassian's false kisses, the laughter of court, the scent of flowers. Now there was only cold. Hope had nearly died when faint footsteps echoed from above. Chapter 2. The Wanderer from the South. Far to the south lay the kingdom of Etheria, where eternal spring reigned, and flowers bloomed in riotous color. Prince Lucian, youngest son of the king, was known for his quiet beauty, dark wavy hair that fell over sharp yet gentle features, warm brown eyes that held secrets, and a single golden earring shaped like a blooming rose. He dressed in black silk embroidered with faint floral patterns, a reminder of the gardens he tended when court life grew too heavy. Etheria's magic was fading. Blossoms withered overnight. Rivers slowed. The oracle spoke of a frozen heart in the north whose release would restore balance to the world. Lucian, restless and seeking purpose beyond palace walls, volunteered to seek the source. Armed with an ancient key said to unlock any curse-born bond and a cloak woven from living petals, he journeyed north. After months through blizzards that would fell lesser men, he reached the Frostfang Tower. Its Gothic spires pierced the stormy sky like accusing fingers. Guided by instinct, he found the hidden door at the base, sealed with the same rusted iron as the chains in legend. Inside, the air was tomb cold. He descended spiral stairs until he reached the iron door. Through a small grated window, he saw her, Seraphina, chained and bloodied, snow settling on her like a shroud. Her green eyes lifted to meet his, and something electric passed between them. Recognition, desperation, desire. Lucian's breath caught. She was the most beautiful creature he had ever seen, even in suffering. He drew the ancient key. It glowed faintly as it touched the chains. Metal groaned and parted. Seraphina slumped forward into his arms, her body trembling from cold and sudden freedom. The padlock on her head remained, but the wrist chains fell away. He carried her up endless stairs to the tower's pinnacle chamber, where a narrow bed and dying embers offered meager comfort. Wrapping her in his petal-woven cloak, he tended her wounds with salves from his pack. His fingers brushed her skin, soft despite the hardship, and she shivered, not from cold this time. Though she could not speak, her eyes spoke volumes. Gratitude, curiosity, hunger. Chapter 3. The Spark Ignites. Days blurred into a fragile rhythm within the tower's frozen embrace. Lucian ventured out into the blinding blizzards to hunt the scarce, hardy creatures that dared the heights. Returning with frost-rimed hair and flushed cheeks, his breath clouding the air as he skinned and cooked their meager meals. He gathered frozen berries, thawing them carefully by the fire, and tended the flames with a quiet devotion that made Seraphina's chest ache in ways she had long forgotten. She watched him endlessly. From her perch on the narrow bed or against the stone wall, her emerald eyes followed every movement. The graceful strength in his arms as he chopped wood scavenged from forgotten crates, the way his dark, wavy hair perpetually fell across his forehead in soft, rebellious strands, the subtle curve of his lips when he noticed her improving strength and offered a gentle, encouraging smile. His golden rose earring caught the firelight like a defiant spark of summer, and the faint floral embroidery on his black shirt whispered of worlds blooming far below. All of it stirred something deep and dormant in her, a flicker of warmth in a heart encased in ice for so long. At first, it was mere curiosity, this southern wanderer who had freed her wrists but not her voice, who treated her scars with salves instead of scorn. But curiosity deepened into fascination, then into a slow burning hunger. She found herself leaning into his casual touches, the brush of his fingers as he handed her a cup of herbal tea, the steadying hand on her elbow when dizziness from years of imprisonment struck. Each contact lingered in her skin like embers, awakening nerves she thought forever numbed. Lucian felt it too. His warm brown eyes would darken when they met hers across the fire, holding a fraction too long. His touches grew less clinical, more exploratory. A thumb grazing her wrist longer than needed when checking bandages, a palm resting on her back as he guided her to the window to watch the endless snow. The air between them thickened, charged with unspoken questions. What is this pull? Dare we name it? One night, as the blizzard raged with particular fury, winds screaming like banished spirits against the tower walls, Lucian tended her once more. The fire roared in the hearth, casting dancing golden light across the chamber. Seraphina sat wrapped in his petal-woven cloak, the fading scars on her arms and wrists bared for his careful ministrations. He knelt before her, dipping a cloth in warm water infused with healing herbs from his pack, gently cleansing the last raw edges where chains had bitten deepest. His touch was reverent at first, professional, soothing, but as the cloth traced the delicate skin of her inner forearm, his fingers lingered, brushing feather light over the healed ridges. Firelight painted warm gold across her bare arms, her collarbone, the soft rise of her chest beneath the loosely draped cloak. Lucian's breath hitched almost imperceptibly, his dark lashes lifted and their eyes locked. In that gaze, everything shifted. His pupils dilated, swallowing the warm brown with raw desire. Seraphina felt heat pull low in her belly, a fierce, forgotten ache. Without thinking, she caught his hand mid-motion, pressing his palm to her cheek. His skin was calloused from travel, yet impossibly gentle, radiating southern warmth against her cool flesh. She nuzzled into it instinctively, eyes fluttering half closed. Lucian froze, then exhaled a shuddering breath. Heat flared openly in his eyes now, hunger, wonder, restraint fraying. Seraphina, he whispered, voice roughened, as if her name alone was a prayer and a plea. No words were needed from her. She pulled him closer by the front of his embroidered shirt, fingers curling into the fabric. He yielded instantly, rising to meet him halfway. Their lips met, hesitant at first, a brush like testing fragile ice. Then, as the spark caught, it ignited, desperate, devouring. His mouth was warm, alive, tasting of wild honey from the berries and sharp pine from the northern air he'd braved. She parted her lips on a silent gasp, and he deepened the kiss, tongue sliding against hers in slow, exploratory strokes that drew a shiver down her spine. She arched into him, hands tangling in his dark hair, tugging gently at the strands, and then at the golden rose earring, eliciting a deep groan from his throat that vibrated against her lips. The sound undid her. Heat flooded her core, thighs pressing together instinctively. His hands, no longer tentative, slid under the cloak, palms skimming her ribs, thumbs brushing the undersides of her breasts until her nipples hardened into aching peaks. Skin burned where he touched, chasing away the curse's lingering chill. They tumbled to the bed in a tangle of limbs and fabric, urgency tempered by awe. Lucian peeled away the cloak and her remaining garments with deliberate slowness, worshipping every inch revealed, lips trailing fire along the curve of her throat, lingering at the pulse point until she trembled. mouth closing over one breast, tongue swirling around the nipple as his hand kneaded the other, drawing silent gasps from her. Lower still, kisses pressed to the soft plane of her stomach, hands parting her thighs with gentle insistence. Serafina's fingers fumbled with his shirt, unbuttoning with impatient tugs to reveal lean muscle dusted with dark hair, warm and alive under her palms. She traced the lines of his chest lower to the V of his hips until her hand closed around his hardness, stroking once, twice, reveling in his sharp inhale and the way his hips bucked into her touch. When he finally settled between her legs, it was with eyes locked, his filled with overwhelming tenderness and fierce need. He entered her slowly, inch by deliberate inch, watching her face for any sign of pain amid the years of isolation. But there was only pleasure, a stretching fullness that bordered on exquisite ache, building like a summer storm, gathering force. She clutched at his shoulders, nails digging crescents as he began to move, deep, measured thrusts that hit sparks deep within her. Pleasure coiled tighter, fierce and cleansing. His hand slipped between them, fingers circling her most sensitive spot with expert pressure until she shattered, body arching off the bed, inner walls clenching around him in waves that drew a guttural moan from his lips. He followed moments later, burying himself deep with a final thrust, spilling hot inside her as his forehead dropped to hers, breath ragged. In that moment, the curse's cold receded utterly, replaced by a fire only they could kindle, a blaze that warmed her blood and thawed her soul. Afterward, they lay entwined amid rumpled furs, his head pillowed on her breast, listening to her heartbeat, her fingers stroking lazily through his dark hair, occasionally tugging the earring to elicit soft chuckles from him. No words passed, none were needed. Love had taken root in that single night, sudden, overwhelming, undeniable, a spark that promised to burn through any darkness yet to come. Interlude: The Origins of the Frost Wraiths. Before the stars learned to burn steadily in the void, before the veil of frost separated worlds, there existed only the primordial silence, a vast, formless expanse where nothing stirred, nothing felt, nothing was. In that endless nothing, the first flickers of existence sparked not from light or warmth, but from the agony of isolation itself. The frost wraiths were born from that agony. In the dawn of creation, when the cosmos began weaving the tapestry of realities, it birthed twin forces: the ember of becoming, raw, chaotic passion that birthed stars, life, emotion, and its shadow counterpart, the void of stasis, the unrelenting hunger to return all things to stillness. The ember scattered fragments of itself across the newborn universes, joy that laughed in solar flares, love that pulsed in planetary hearts, voices that sang galaxies into shape. But the void of stasis recoiled from this tumult. It gathered the discarded echoes, the pains of separation when stars drifted apart, the grief of dying light, the loneliness of infinite dark, and coalesced them into sentient horrors. These were the frost wraiths, spectral entities of translucent ice in swirling blizzard, formless yet ever shifting, with eyes like black voids that reflected the viewer's deepest isolation back at them. Their birthplace was the realm of eternal winter, a shattered fragment of the primordial silence that the cosmos had rejected. Here no time flowed, no warmth penetrated. The wraiths drifted in endless torment, forever craving what they could never possess, the stolen essences of emotion that the ember had claimed. They fed not of flesh or blood, but of the freezing of feeling, joy petrified into brittle shards, love encased in unmelting glaciers, voices trapped in echoing caverns of ice where screams reverberated for unheard. In their malice, the wraiths discovered a cruel ingenuity. They could not cross into warmer realms uninvited, but they could bargain. Through thin places in reality, the veil of frost, they whispered to mortals who harbored voids in their own souls, the envious, the grieving, the power-hungry who would trade vitality for dominion. The first pact was struck eons ago with a wandering sorcerer king who had lost his voice to a cosmic storm. In exchange for silencing his enemies forever, he offered the wraiths his capacity for laughter. They took it greedily, and from his tribute they forged the blueprint for greater artifacts, chains that drank the blood of passion, locks that devoured the light of expression. Over millennia, the wraiths grew cunning and ravenous. They learned that the purest tributes came from the breaking of unbreakable bonds, love betrayed, joy shattered, voices silenced not by force, but by choice. Each pact thinned the veil further, allowing slivers of their realm to bleed into the mortal world. Sudden blizzards in summer lands, unexplained frosts that withered hearts as much as crops. Yet the wraiths were not invincible. Their existence was parasitic. They could only endure by siphoning emotion. Direct confrontation with true, unfrozen feeling, passion that burned without restraint, love that forgave the unforgivable, scorched them like sunlight on hoarfrost. This vulnerability birthed their deepest hatred for beings like Seraphina, whose summer magic embodied the ember's untainted flame, and for any who might wield love as a weapon against the cold. Morgana's summons was merely the latest in an eternal chain of desperate mortals. She offered her fading beauty and warmth, believing she could control the hunger. But the wraiths always claimed more than bargained, whispering promises of power while plotting to drag entire worlds into their stasis. In the end, the Frost Wraith's origins and cosmic rejection made them fragile paradoxes, entities of eternal winter who feared the slightest thaw. They could grant dominion over ice, but never over fire. And when a heart imprisoned by their artifacts was reclaimed by ferocious redemptive love, the wraiths felt true terror, the scream of melting, the agony of returning to the primordial silence from which they were born. For in the cosmos's grand design, even the void of stasis could not withstand the ember's unrelenting blaze. Interlude: The origins of the auroral kin. In the time before time was measured by suns or seasons, when the cosmos still hummed with the raw song of creation, the auroral kin did not yet exist as a people bound to any land. They were born of the great aurora itself, the shimmering veil of light that danced across the primordial skies, a living bridge between the ember of becoming and the void of stasis. Legend whispers that the first auroral kin emerged from the aurora's tears of joy. When the ember scattered its passionate fragments across the void, birthing stars that burned with love, worlds that pulsed with life, the void wept in silent envy. Those tears froze mid-fall, catching the ember's light and fracturing it into countless colors: emerald quames, violet storms, crimson rivers of dawn. Where they touched the newborn earth, life stirred, not in fire or ice alone, but in perfect harmony. From these frozen tears rose the auroral kin, ethereal wanderers with skin that shimmered like northern lights, hair woven from strands of living color that shifted with their moods, and eyes reflecting the endless sky. They were neither children of pure summer nor winter, but of the balance, the eternal dance where warmth kissed cold and withdrew, where light pierced darkness only to yield again. Their homeland was the wandering plains, vast tundras that bloomed briefly in summer meadows, rivers that sang in thaw and slept in ice, forests where trees bore silver leaves that chimed like bells under auroral glow. The kin lived as nomads of the cycle, following reindeer herds with coats that mirrored the skies. They celebrated the turning seasons with great festivals. In deepest winter, they kindled bonfires and sang to coax the sun's return. In fleeting summer, they wove flower crowns and danced barefoot in meadows, honoring the brief reign of warmth. Their magic was innate and gentle, the song of aurora. Voices raised in harmony could paint the skies with light, heal wounds with glowing touch, or call gentle snows to blanket the earth in rest. Love among them was free and fierce, bonds formed under dancing lights, children conceived in the glow of equinox fires. They revered duality, pairing songs of joy with laments of loss, knowing one could not exist without the other. Velor the Harmonious and Lyria were among the earliest remembered chieftains, he a master singer whose voice could still storms, she a bloom caller who coaxed life from frozen soil. Together they embodied the kin's creed: embrace the thaw, honor the frost, in balance we endure eternal. The kin had no kings or queens, only harmonists who guided through consensus. They traded with distant southern tribes, sharing auroral silks and songs for spices and stories. Conflict was rare, disputes settled by duets where the most balanced melody prevailed. But their idyllic existence hinged on the fragile great balance. When the primordial clash between ember and void escalated into the shattering of the cycle, the northern plains bore the brunt. The aurora dimmed, the veil thickened, and perpetual twilight descended. The kin's songs grew strained, flowers withered unborn, children were born paler, their shimmering skin fading to frost. In desperation, they clung to their creed longer than wisdom allowed, refusing darker pacts until loss forced Velor's hand. The auroral kin who survived became the winter sovereigns, their shimmering beauty cooled to icy pallor, their songs tempered to commands, their free love locked into dutiful lineages. Yet echoes of their origins lingered. Even in the sovereign's coldest halls, hidden chambers held carvings of dancing auroras in blooming meadows. Irelise, the last, secretly wore a pendant of frozen auroral tear, reminder of the people who once danced under living lights, before balance broke, and winter claimed them forever. In the reborn springs after the curse's breaking, faint auroras returned to Veloria's skies, whispers that the kin's ancient song had not been silenced entirely, waiting for true balance to return. Chapter 4. Blossoming Love Amid the Snow. Weeks dissolved into months, and the Frostfang Tower, once a monolithic tomb of iron and ice, transformed into a crucible of unspoken desires, where every glance lingered too long, every brush of skin ignited unspoken promises. The Gothic spires outside still clawed at the perpetual blizzard, but inside, the air thickened with anticipation, a perpetual hum of tension that coiled tighter with each passing day, turning their sanctuary into a place where restraint frayed and hunger simmered just beneath the surface. Lucien's patience was a delicious torment. With Seraphina's voice locked away, communication became a game of heated silences and deliberate touches. He taught her gestures that started innocent, a finger to lips for quiet, a hand over heart for want, but evolved into something far more dangerous, a slow trail of his fingertips down her arm to signify crave, or a lingering press of his palm against her lower back that made her breath hitch, promising soon. Parchment notes turned illicit. He'd slipped them into her hand when she least expected. Tonight, I'll make you tremble until you forget the cold. She'd respond in kind, sketching teasing outlines of his body or writing, deny me longer and see how I claim you. She discovered the way his laughter rumbled low when she accidentally brushed against him while passing, how his warm brown eyes darkened instantly, pupils blown wide with restrained need. He learned the subtle arch of her back when his breath ghosted her neck while reading aloud, the way her emerald gaze would flick to his mouth and hold, daring him to close the distance. Playfulness became foreplay. She'd steal his cloak and drape it over her bare shoulders, letting it slip just enough to reveal the curve of her breast. He'd retaliate by tracing ice-cold fingertips along her inner thigh under the table during meals, stopping inches from where she ached most, watching her thighs clench in silent frustration. Days stretched the tension to breaking. Mornings shared baths in a scavenged copper tub filled with snow-melted water warmed by the fire. He'd wash her slowly, lathering soap over her scars with reverent strokes that turned lingering, thumbs circling her nipples until they peaked hard and sensitive, but pulling away with a wicked smile when she pressed closer. Afternoons on balconies, wind whipping their clothes tight against bodies, his hands sliding possessively around her waist, fingers dipping just beneath her gown's edge to tease the heat between her legs. Light, maddening circles that left her wet and wanting, only to withdraw when her hips chased his touch. But the nights were where the coiled tension finally snapped, again and again, each release only tightening the spring for the next. Some nights built slowly, excruciatingly, a torture of denial that left them both shaking. By firelight, Lucien would undress her inch by inch, lips following fingertips, kissing the hollow of her throat while his hands cupped her breasts, rolling nipples between fingers until she arched silently, begging with her body. He'd trail lower, tongue tracing the scars on her wrists, then down her stomach, parting her thighs to breathe hot against her core without touching. "Not yet," he'd murmur, voice rough with his own need, feeling her pulse throb under his hovering mouth. Only when tears of frustration gathered in her emerald eyes would he finally taste her. Slow, deliberate licks that built her to the edge, then retreated again and again until she gripped his dark hair desperately. When he finally let her shatter, it was explosive, her body convulsing, thighs clamping around his head as waves crashed endlessly. He'd rise then, entering her in one deep thrust while aftershocks still rippled through her, drawing out a second deeper climax that left them both gasping, sweat slick and clinging. Other nights erupted without warning, raw, frantic, the pent-up day's teasing exploding into dominance. He'd pin her against the cold stone wall, the contrast of icy rock against her back and his burning body make her gasp. Hands rough on her hips, he'd lift her, her legs wrapping instinctively around his waist as he ground against her, letting her feel how hard the day's restraint had made him. "Feel what you do to me," he'd growl, freeing himself to tease her entrance, sliding along her slick folds without entering again and again until she clawed at his shoulders in silent demand. Only then would he drive into her, deep, punishing thrusts that echoed in the chamber, her golden hair whipping as her head fell back. Snow swirled outside the window like a frantic audience. Inside, their rhythm was feral, his mouth on her neck, marking her, one hand slipping between them to circle her clit until she came hard around him, milking his own release in hot pulses deep inside. There were nights she turned the tables, tension reversing into her control. Beneath thick furs, she'd push him down, straddling his hips while denying him full contact, grinding slowly against his length, letting him feel her wetness but not allowing entry. Her hands would pin his wrists, golden hair curtaining them as she teased his nipples with teeth and tongue, trailing lower to take him in her mouth, slow, torturous suction that had him bucking, begging hoarsely. Only when his control shattered, voice breaking on her name, would she sink down, riding him with deliberate rolls that built agonizingly slow, then faster, relentless, her breast slaying as she chased mutual oblivion. Climax hit them together, her clenching around him, his hips surging up as he spilled, fingers bruising her thighs. Every encounter left them more entangled, pleasure laced with the curse's defiance, bodies marked with love bites and scratches that healed into reminders. The padlock's ache faded further, as if their sustained hunger eroded its hold. Lucien's planted seeds flourished impossibly, pink blossoms carpeting the floor, their sweet scent mingling with the musk of their lovemaking. In that perfumed haven, Serafina wrote on parchment pressed to his sweat-damp chest, "You are my spring and my endless fire." Their love was no gentle bloom now, but a wildfire, sustained tension feeding ever greater flames, promising that no curse could outlast such consuming desire. Interlude: The Shadows of Cassian's Heart. To truly understand the depth of Cassian's betrayal, we have to understand the fractured soul that drove him to such darkness. Cassian was born the illegitimate son of Valoria's late king, hidden away in a remote estate to avoid scandal. His mother, a lowly enchantress with minor gifts, raised him on tales of the throne that should have been his by blood. She died young, poisoned, Cassian always suspected, by the queen's spies. Left alone, he grew into a man of sharp beauty and sharper ambition, tall, with raven black hair, piercing gray eyes, and a smile that could charm courts or conceal daggers. He clawed his way into nobility through cunning alliances and whispered secrets. When Seraphina's betrothal was announced, Cassian saw not love, but opportunity. The princess was beloved, powerful, pure, everything he was not. Marrying her would legitimize his claim, silence the whispers of bastard, and place him one heartbeat from the crown. But Seraphina's love was genuine. She saw good in him, defended him against courtiers who sensed his ruthlessness. In private moments, she would trace the faint scar on his jaw, a remnant of childhood beatings, and whisper that he was enough as he was. For fleeting instants, Cassian felt something perilously close to true affection. He almost believed he could rule beside her as an equal, not a usurper. Then came the prophecy from Morgana, the exiled sorceress whose own beauty had once rivaled Seraphina's. Morgana had been Cassian's secret lover in his youth, passionate, consuming nights where her dark magic heightened every sensation until pleasure bordered on pain. She promised him the throne outright if he removed Seraphina. "Love makes you weak," she hissed during one fevered tryst, nails raking down his back. "Power makes you eternal." Cassian wavered. In the end, fear won. Fear of vulnerability, of never being enough, of the court discovering his bastard blood. He chose Morgana's curse over Seraphina's light. Watching the chains bind her, hearing her silenced screams, he felt a twist of regret so sharp he buried it beneath layers of justification. She would have discovered my secrets. She would have left me ruined. Years later, as the curse weakened, that buried regret festered into obsession. Cassian convinced himself Seraphina still belonged to him, his bride, his property. Storming the tower was not just about preserving power. It was a desperate, twisted attempt to reclaim what he had destroyed, to force her back into the cage of his ambition. In truth, Cassian was the most cursed of all, trapped in a prison of his own making, forever chasing a throne that would never warm the emptiness inside him. Chapter 5. The Shadow of Betrayal. The storm that night was unlike any before, winds howling like wounded beasts, snow lashing the tower windows until the glass groaned. Lucien had been gone longer than usual, hunting in the whiteout for the scarce game that sustained them. Seraphina waited by the fire, wrapped in his petal-woven cloak, her fingers tracing the faint scars on her wrists where the chains had bitten deepest. The padlock still weighed on her forehead, a dull, dull ache, but the pain had become bearable. Because of him, because of the way he looked at her, like she was the first bloom after endless winter. When the door finally burst open, letting in a whirlwind of ice, Lucien stumbled through, his dark hair plastered with snow, his face ashen beneath the flush of cold. In his gloved hand, he clutched something small and black, a raven's message tube sealed with crimson wax, bearing an insignia that pierced Seraphina's heart like a dagger. Cassian's crest, the coiled serpent entwined with a crown. Her stomach twisted. She rose slowly, the cloak slipping from her shoulders. Though she could not speak, her eyes demanded answers. "What is that? Why do you look like death itself?" Lucien's hands shook as he broke the seal. The parchment unfurled, revealing elegant script that Seraphina recognized instantly. Cassian's hand. He read it in silence first, his warm brown eyes widening, then filling with horror. When he finally looked up at her, tears had frozen on his lashes. "Seraphina," his voice cracked like thin ice. "There's something I have to tell you." He sank to his knees before her, the letter trembling in his grip. Word by word, he confessed everything. Years ago, before the oracle's prophecy reached Aetheria, Cassian sent envoys south. He claimed Seraphina had descended into madness, that her magic had turned dark and threatened both kingdoms. He offered gold, mountains of it, in exchange for an alliance sealed by blood. The task: send an assassin north to ensure the mad princess remained imprisoned forever. If the curse showed signs of weakening, end her life. Lucien was the youngest prince, always overlooked, always the gentle one who tended flowers instead of wielding swords. He'd volunteered. He told himself it was mercy, to end the suffering of a deranged woman lost to darkness. He carried the ancient key, not to free her, but to confirm the curse's hold, and to kill if necessary. The first night he saw her through the grated window, chained, bloodied, yet with eyes that held no madness, only sorrow, something in him shattered. He burned Cassian's original orders in the fire that very night. Every touch since, every kiss, every night spent tangled in desperate passion had been his attempt to atone. But the new letter was a command. Finish the task. The winter weakens. Kill her or lose everything. Serafina staggered back as if struck. The room spun. All the warmth they'd built, the laughter, the slow caresses by firelight, the way he whispered her name like a prayer when he moved inside her, turned to ash in her mouth. Betrayal. Again. Her chest heaved with silent sobs. She clutched at her throat, wishing she could scream, curse him, demand why the gods tormented her with love, only to rip it away. Cassian's cold ambition had been expected, but Lucien had been her miracle, her spring. She fled to the far corner of the chamber, curling against the cold stone, arms wrapped around herself. The scars on her wrists burned anew, as if the chains had returned. When Lucien reached for her, she flinched violently, green eyes blazing with hurt so raw it scorched him. "Don't!" he begged, voice breaking. "Please, Serafina, I love you. I've loved you since the moment I saw you. Everything I've done since that first night has been for you, for us." But the wound was too deep. That night, she slept alone on the hard floor by the dying embers, while Lucien sat vigil across the room, head in hands, silent tears falling on the petal-strewn stone.
Interlude: The Origins of the Eternal Frost Curse, revised with heightened ominous prophecy. Long before Serafina's birth, in the shadowed annals of Valoria's history, the curse took root, not as a sudden act of spite, but as the culmination of centuries-old wounds, forbidden magic, and the corrosive power of envy. The tale begins with the ancient Winter Sovereigns, a forgotten lineage of sorcerers who once ruled the northern wilds before Valoria's golden age. They drew power from the Veil of Frost, an ethereal barrier between the mortal world and the realm of eternal winter, a desolate plain inhabited by primordial entities of ice and silence. These sovereigns forged pacts with the frost wraiths, spectral beings that granted immense magic in exchange for emotional tributes: joy frozen into stillness, love locked away, voices silenced forever. The greatest artifact of this pact was the Lock of Silence, a massive rusted padlock forged from star-fallen iron infused with wraith essence, and its companion, Chains of Crimson Vein, which drank blood to bind both body and magic. When Valoria's ancestors overthrew the Winter Sovereigns in a war of fire and summer magic, the artifacts were meant to be destroyed. But the last sovereign, the formidable Airless, her eyes like shattered glaciers, her voice a blizzard's howl, refused oblivion. As flames licked at her throne of ice, she invoked the veil one final time. Blood from her own veins spilled across the artifact, and with her dying breath she etched a prophecy into the frost itself, a malediction of inescapable doom, carved in runes that wept black ice and whispered dread to any who dared read them. "Beware, ye fools who grasp at winter's poisoned crown, ye who dare entomb a heart of purest, blazing flame, a soul unsullied, luminous as the sun's unholy wrath at dawn, in chains that gorge on crimson lifeblood, veins weeping eternal scarlet, and a lock that feasts on voice and light, devouring screams into abyssal void. Ye shall claim dominion most accursed, thrones of jagged ice forever unmelting, realms groveling in endless suffocating night, power to silence empires, to freeze the stars in their screaming descent, to bind the living in frost-rimed graves while yet they breathe. But heed the terror that lurks in frost's deceitful heart, for winter's grip endures solely in isolation's merciless soul-rending tomb. Should a flame of love, fierce, devouring, forged in betrayal's infernal crucible, hammered by forgiveness wrung from blood and agony, and fed by passion that mocks death's cold grasp, pierce the prison of ice, shatter the silenced heart's glacial chains, then despair, O wielder of this doom, the curse shall twist and strike like a viper roused in its frozen lair, venomous, inexorable, devouring its own master from within. Chains shall coil upon the betrayer, flaying flesh in torment without end. The lock shall clamp upon their throat, sealing wails in eternal echoing nothingness. Winter's rage, blind, insatiable, shall consume its summoner alive, bones cracking in blizzards unborn, souls shredded by wraiths betrayed. And summer's vengeance, savage, unrelenting, a cataclysm of molten gold, shall rend the veil asunder, drown the shadows in scorching inferno, reclaim the stolen with fury that scorches worlds to ash, and drag the cursed into oblivion screaming more. Thus thundered Airless, last sovereign of frost, her dying breath a gale of malice. Love unbroken is the blade that carves winter's heart and buries its wielder in the grave they dug for another. The prophecy lingered like a blight, etched in forbidden tomes and crumbling ruins, its words evoking chills that no fire could banish, dismissed by the arrogant as mere myth, yet feared in whispers by those who felt the veil's hungry gaze. Centuries passed, until Morgana unearthed the truth. Born into minor nobility, Morgana inherited faint echoes of sovereign blood, shadow magic that twisted light into darkness. Her beauty was once legendary, raven hair cascading like midnight, violet eyes that ensnared souls. But ambition demanded more. In the palace's hidden vaults, Morgana discovered the artifacts and Airless's prophecy. Performing blood rituals under eclipsed moons, she bargained with the frost wraiths, trading her warmth, her joy, her fading beauty for power. The wraiths accepted, but bound the prophecy deeper into the artifacts as an unbreakable malediction, a cosmic trap for the hubristic. Morgana read the words and shuddered, yet laughed through clenched teeth. Love, forgiveness born from agony, she spat to the encroaching shadows. No soul endures such torment unbroken. No heart forgives the abyss. Her envy ignited fully when Seraphina blossomed, golden-haired, emerald-eyed, wielding summer magic that healed without cost, loved without condition. To Morgana, whose skin now grew pale and sharp as the wraiths feasted, Seraphina was an abomination, a living rebuke to her sacrifices. Through fevered nights with Cassian, Morgana wove the curse, the chains to bleed and bind, the lock to silence magic and voice, the eternal winter to enforce isolation. She chose the Frostfang Tower deliberately, Airless's ancient stronghold, where the veil thinned and the words of the prophecy still shimmered faintly on the walls, pulsing with malevolent warning. Morgana believed she had defied fate. Isolation would prevail. No devouring flame could reach a prisoner lost to time and torment. She never foresaw Lucian, the gentle prince from blooming lands, carrying an ancient key of summer-forged light. Nor did she anticipate the ferocious love that would bloom in defiance, passion that burnt hotter for every scar, forgiveness that scorched betrayal's ashes, a bond savage enough to invoke the prophecy's apocalyptic rebound. In the end, the curse, born of ancient pride, fueled by modern envy, became its own undoing. Airless's malediction, once a desperate dying curse, proved inexorable truth. Love unbroken became the blade that carved winter's heart, and buries its wielder in the grave they dug for another.
Chapter 6. Trials of the Heart. The days after the confession stretched into an exquisite agony, each moment laced with unspoken longing and searing hurt. Seraphina drifted through the tower like a specter of winter itself, pale, untouchable, her emerald eyes shadowed with betrayal's storm. She avoided Lucien's gaze, yet felt it constantly, the weight of his remorse, the heat of his unspoken desire. Meals were silent, nights were colder than the blizzard outside. She slept curled at the bed's edge, back turned, while Lucien lay awake inches away, his breath ragged with restraint. He proved his devotion in small, aching ways. He foraged through blinding snow for frost-bloom herbs, returning half-frozen to brew teas that dulled the padlock's throb. He carved delicate ice roses and left them on her pillow, each petal etched with words, "I burn for you still. Forgive me, or let me burn alone." He spoke to the silence, confessing his own hidden scars, how his brothers in Aetheria had mocked his gentleness, how Cassian's gold had been a poisoned lure for a prince who felt invisible. One dusk, Seraphina found him on the balcony again, silhouetted against the bruised sky. Snowflakes caught in his dark waves, his golden rose earring glinting like a lone star. His shoulders shook, not from cold, but from silent sobs. Something in her fractured. She crossed the threshold, the wind whipping her golden hair. When he turned, eyes red and raw, she saw not the deceiver, but the man who had thawed her frozen world. Their reconciliation began not with words, but with touch. Seraphina's fingers brushed his cheek, tracing the path of a frozen tear. The contact ignited them both, months of kent-up grief, desire, and love exploding in a single spark. She pulled him inside, away from the storm, her hands fierce on his cloak as she tore it away. Lucien gasped her name, voice breaking, but he let her lead, atonement in surrender. They stumbled into the bedchamber, firelight casting golden shadows across bare skin as clothes fell away in frantic urgency. Seraphina pushed him onto the bed, straddling his hips, her nails digging into his shoulders hard enough to leave crescents. Pain and pleasure blurred. She wanted to punish and possess him all at once. "You hurt me," she signed with trembling hands, even as she ground against him, feeling his hardness strain beneath her. "I know," he whispered hoarsely, hands hovering at her waist, waiting for permission. "Use me. Break me. I'm yours." Permission granted, she claimed him. She sank down slowly, taking him inch by torturous inch, eyes locked on his as she savored his shuddering groan. Her body, long denied his full surrender, clenched around him possessively. She rode him with raw intensity, hips rolling in deep, punishing circles, breasts swaying as she arched back, golden hair cascading like a veil. Every thrust was a reclamation. You are mine, despite the lies. Mine to hurt, mine to heal. Lucien's hands finally gripped her thighs, fingers bruising as he met her rhythm, thrusting up to meet her descents with desperate force. Sweat glistened on his chest. His dark hair clung to his forehead. "Seraphina, gods, I love you," he gasped, voice ragged. One hand slid up to cup her breast, thumbs circling the hardened peak until she moaned silently, head thrown back. The pace turned frantic. She leaned forward, capturing his mouth in a bruising kiss, teeth nipping his lower lip, tongues battling as tears mingled on their cheeks. His free hand slipped between them, fingers finding her most sensitive spot, circling with expert pressure born of months learning her body's secrets. Pleasure coiled tight, unbearable. She came first, shattering around him with a silent cry, body convulsing, nails raking down his chest hard enough to draw thin lines of blood. The sight undid him. Lucian followed with a guttural shout, hips bucking as he spilled deep inside her, arms crushing her against him as if afraid she'd vanish. They didn't separate. Still joined, trembling, Seraphina collapsed on his chest, listening to his thunderous heartbeat. His fingers stroked her spine in slow, reverent circles, tracing old scars and new marks alike. "I forgive you," she wrote later on his sweat-damp skin with a fingertip, the words shimmering in firelight before fading. "Because losing you would curse me worse than any chain." Lucian pressed kisses to her temple, her eyelids, her lips, now soft, worshipful. "Then let me spend eternity proving I'm worthy." That night, they made love again, slower, deeper, every caress a vow. He took her against the wall, her legs wrapped around his waist as he whispered endearments in her ear. Later, on the fur rugs before the fire, she explored him with her mouth, drawing out his pleasure until he begged. Hours blurred into dawn, bodies entwined in exhaustive, exquisite reunion. Forgiveness was not a single moment, but this, passion fierce enough to burn away betrayal's ashes, leaving only unbreakable love. Interlude: The Origins of the Winter Sovereigns. In the elder days, when the world was still raw and the veil between realms thin as hoarfrost on a blade, the lands that would one day become Valoria and the Frostfang Wilds were not divided by summer and winter. There was only the great balance, seasons turning an eternal cycle, warmth yielding to cold and cold to warmth again, life and stillness dancing without dominion. The first of the winter sovereigns arose from catastrophe, the shattering of the cycle, a cataclysm born of celestial discord. When the ember of becoming and the void of stasis clashed in their primordial war, a fragment of the cosmos cracked. A vast northern expanse was torn from the turning wheel of seasons and hurled into perpetual twilight, trapped forever on the cusp of frost. Rivers froze mid-flow, forests petrified into crystalline silhouettes, and the sun, once a faithful lover, retreated, offering only pale, distant light. The people who dwelt there, the auroral kin, were not warriors or mages by birth. They were wanderers of balance, herders of silver reindeer, singers whose songs coaxed auroras to dance, lovers who celebrated the brief thaws with festivals of fire and flower. Their leader was Valor the Harmonious, a chieftain with eyes like twin dawns and a voice that could soothe blizzards. His queen, Lyrel, bore the gift of summer's echo. She could call warmth from her palms, blooming meadows even in snow. When the shattering struck, half the auroral kin perished instantly, frozen in expressions of shock. The survivors huddled in caves of blue ice, watching their children pale and weaken, their songs fall silent. Valor sent emissaries south, pleading for aid from warmer kin, but the veil, thickening in the cataclysm's wake, turned them back, lost in endless white. Desperation birthed the first pact. One night, as Valor mourned beside Lyrel's frost-stiffened body, she had given her last warmth to save their infant daughter, a whisper threaded through the wind. The frost wraiths, newly coalesced from the void's agony, sensed mortal despair across the thinning veil. They offered survival, power to command the endless winter, to carve palaces from glaciers, to sustain life in stasis rather than let it flicker out. The price? Emotion itself. Not all at once, but in slow sips, joy dulled to endurance, love cooled to duty, voices tempered to commands rather than songs. Valor refused at first, clinging to the old balance, but when his daughter, pale, breath shallow, began to fade, he knelt in the snow and accepted. The frost wraiths poured through the veil in a storm of black ice, wrapping around him like lovers denied too long. His blood froze and thawed in the same heartbeat. His eyes turned from dawn gold to glacial silver. He rose, transformed, the first sovereign, skin luminous with hoarfrost, voice a wind that commanded obedience from snow and stone alike. With this power, Valor saved his people.
He raised the first ice citadels, taught them to draw sustenance from the wraith's cold essence rather than fleeting warmth. The auroral kin became the winter sovereigns, pale, beautiful, eternal in their frozen realm. Generation by generation, the pacts deepened, each ruler offering more, passion, laughter, mercy, until the lineage grew remote, their hearts glacial thrones. Valor's daughter, the child he saved, became the second sovereign. She inherited his power, but remembered her mother's warmth. In secret she carved summer flowers in hidden ice chambers, dreaming of thaw. Yet the wraiths claimed her joy young, leaving only duty. Thus the sovereigns ruled for millennia, not as tyrants born, but as survivors twisted by necessity. They built the Frostfang Cower as a beacon across the veil, forged the first chains and locks as tools to bind unruly blizzards, and later to punish those who clung too fiercely to emotion. Their reign ended only when southern descendants, calling themselves Valorians, ironically claiming Valor's ancient name, grew bold. Wielding rediscovered ember relics, invaded, seeing the sovereigns not as monsters hoarding power, but as tragic wards of winter. Earless, the last, carried echoes of that original desperation. Her forbidden love for Alar mirrored Valor's grief for Lyrel, her betrayal a cruel reprise of the South's abandonment. In her dying curse, she ensured the sovereign's legacy endured, not as rulers, but as a warning. Power born of loss devours the wielder, and winter's embrace, once accepted, never truly releases. The winter sovereigns began as guardians of a broken balance, forced into stasis to survive. They ended as architects of eternal frost, proof that even the noblest heart, frozen to save what it loves, may one day lock away the world in its grief.
Interlude: The Tragedy of Airless, last sovereign of frost. Long before the kingdoms of Valoria rose in golden splendor, the northern wilds were ruled by the winter sovereigns, a lineage of pale, ethereal rulers whose blood sang with the chill of the veil. Among them, Airless was the greatest and the last, a queen of breathtaking, terrible beauty, with hair like spun moonlight on fresh snow, skin translucent as hoarfrost, and eyes the color of shattered glaciers, deep blue fractured with silver veins that seemed to swirl like living blizzards. Born under a rare aurora that bled crimson across the sky, an omen the court seers called the Bleeding Veil, Airless inherited the throne young, when her mother perished in a ritual gone awry, consumed by the frost wraith's insatiable hunger. From childhood, Airless was steeped in the old pacts. She learned to whisper across the veil, offering slivers of mortal emotion, grief, longing, fleeting joys, in exchange for power that bent blizzards to her will and forged ice into unbreakable fortresses. Yet Airless was not born cruel. In her early reign, she was known as the Thawning Queen, for she sought balance. Unlike her ancestors, who demanded absolute stasis, Airless dreamed of harmony between winter's stillness and summer's fleeting warmth. She believed the frost wraiths could be tamed, their hunger sated without devouring entire souls. In secret, she studied forbidden texts from southern traders, tales of blooming lands where love burned eternal and voices rang free. It was this hidden yearning that became her undoing. During a rare diplomatic truce, a southern envoy arrived, Prince Alar of the nascent Summer clans, ancestors to Valoria's founders. Tall and golden, with sun-kissed skin, laughing amber eyes, and hair like ripe wheat, Alar embodied everything Airless secretly craved. He brought gifts of living flowers that bloomed even in her ice palaces, and stories of rivers that never froze, hearts that forgave without cost. Their meetings began as politics, negotiations over border skirmishes caused by unchecked blizzards. But soon, stolen moments followed, walks along frozen lakes where Alar's warmth melted paths through snow, nights in hidden grottos where he taught her the language of touch, unmarred by cold. Airless, who had never known gentleness, surrendered to him completely. Their love was fierce, forbidden, consuming. In the heart of her throne room, beneath auroras that danced like witnesses, they entwined, his heat against her chill, bodies moving in desperate rhythm as if to bridge worlds. She traced the warmth of his skin with trembling fingers. He kissed the frost from her lips until she gasped, alive in ways the wraiths could never touch. For the first time, Airless felt her blood run hot, her magic flicker with summer sparks. She whispered dreams of abdicating, of fleeing south to live where winter was but a season, not a cage. Alar swore the same. He spoke of uniting their peoples, ending the ancient divide. In passion's afterglow, he vowed, "Your hearts will never know ice again. I will thaw you forever." But ambition poisoned the south as surely as envy gnawed the north. Alar's clan elders feared winter's power. They saw Airless not as a lover, but as a threat, a sorceress who could freeze their blooming lands with a whisper. In secret councils, they convinced Alar that love was weakness, marry her for alliance, then betray her, to seize the artifacts and break the sovereign line forever. Gold, promises of eternal summer glory, and whispers of her unnatural cold twisted his heart. On the night of the proposed union, a grand ceremony where North and South would exchange vows, under the veil, betrayal struck. As Airless stood in her gown of living frost flowers, radiant with hope, Alar's forces unleashed hidden summer magic, flames conjured from southern relics, arrows tipped with ember essence. Chaos erupted. Her court fell screaming, ice melting into rivers of blood. Airless fought desperately, calling blizzards that buried attackers, but Alar himself approached her on the throne dais, with dagger in hand. "I loved you," he said, voice breaking even as ambition hardened his eyes. "But love cannot rule. Summer must conquer winter." He struck, not to kill outright, but to wound and bind. As she bled, he helped chain her with prototypes of the Crimson Vein artifacts, forcing her to watch her palace burn. In her final moments, pinned to her melting throne, Airless invoked the deepest pact. She offered everything to the Frost Wraiths, her remaining joy, her shattered love, her very capacity for forgiveness, in exchange for one last act of vengeance. Blood pouring from her wounds, she carved the prophecy into the frost with her nails, infusing it with her dying rage, a curse upon any who would repeat her betrayal, imprisoning a heart of purest flame as she had been imprisoned in false love. The wraiths accepted greedily. As flames closed in, Airless's body crystallized into eternal ice, her scream frozen forever in the veil. But her prophecy endured, a blade of malice waiting for the next betrayer. Alar claims victory, founding the lines that became Valoria, yet he never thawed. Haunted by glacier eyes in his dreams, he withered young, his heart encased in secret frost. The South flourished, but whispers persisted. The last sovereign's love betrayed had cursed all who wielded winter's power through deception. Airless's tragedy birthed the eternal frost curse's deepest irony. Born from a queen who once believed in love's thaw, it could only be broken by the very thing that destroyed her, a love true enough to forgive betrayal's blade. Her spirit lingered in the veil, a wraith among wraiths, watching, waiting for the prophecy's fulfillment.
Chapter 7. Breaking the Curse. Spring's first fragile warmth kissed the frost fangs when the shadow arrived. Trumpets of war horns echoed up the mountainside. Cassian had come personally, with Morgana and a host of armored guards, sensing the curses unraveling through his dark bond with the sorceress. They stormed the tower gates, black banners snapping in the wind. Lucian met them on the spiral stairs, sword drawn, though he was no warrior born. He fought with desperate grace, felling several guards, but numbers and Morgana's magic overwhelmed him.
Shadowy tendrils pinned him to the wall, thorns of darkness piercing his shoulders until blood bloomed across his embroidered shirts. Cassian ascended to the pinnacle chamber, Morgana at his side, her beauty withered into something skeletal and cruel. He found Seraphina standing defiant before the fire, golden hair loose and wild, green eyes blazing. "My bride," Cassian sneered, drawing a jeweled dagger. "Still beautiful even after all this time. A pity you forced my hand." He advanced. Morgana raised her hands, dark energy crackling. In that moment, Seraphina stepped between Cassian and the pinned Lucian. Unarmed, voiceless, but unafraid. Her stance screamed defiance. "You will not take him. You will not take us." Lucian strained against the bonds, horror in his eyes. "Seraphina, no!" Cassian laughed coldly. "Still protecting weaklings? You could have ruled with me." But Seraphina's gaze locked on Lucian's. In it was everything, the pain, the forgiveness, the fierce love that had survived betrayal's fire. Lucian understood. With a roar of effort, he tore one arm free, blood streaming. He hurled the ancient key, not at the padlock, but pressing it to Seraphina's chest, over her beating heart. "My heart was locked long before yours," he gasped. "In duty, in lies, in fear, you freed me with your strength, your passion, your mercy. Now let my love free you, completely, selflessly, forever." The key blazed with golden light, warmer than any southern sun. It poured into Seraphina like liquid fire, through her heart, up her throat, shattering the padlock in an explosion of rusted fragments. Her voice returned in a triumphant cry that shook the tower. "I love you!" Magic erupted. Pure, golden, alive. It flooded the chamber, turning Morgana's darkness against her. The sorceress screamed as her own curse consumed her, aging her to dust in seconds. Cassian's dagger clattered away as vines of living bloom erupted from the stone, wrapping him in unbreakable embrace. He fled in terror down the stairs, vanishing forever into the melting snows. The shadows dissolved. Lucian slumped forward into Seraphina's arms, weak from blood loss but smiling through tears. She kissed him fiercely, hands glowing as her restored magic healed his wounds. Outside, the eternal blizzard ceased. Sunlight broke through clouds for the first time in centuries. Snow melted in rivers. Flowers burst across the mountainside in riotous color, pink petals drifting like blessings. In the tower's highest chamber, amid falling blossoms, Seraphina and Lucian held each other as the world reborn unfolded below. Their love, tested by ice, forged in fire, redeemed through forgiveness, had conquered the darkest curse. And in the years that followed, their passion never faded, their bond only deepened, proving that even the deepest betrayals could bloom into the truest, most enduring love. Epilogue. Eternal Spring. Vyloria and Etheria united under Seraphina and Lucian's rule. The tower became a garden palace, its Gothic spires draped in vines and blossoms. Seraphina's wrists healed completely, faint scars a reminder of strength won. Their love remained passionate nights spent in petal-strewn beds, days filled with laughter and tender touches. Children with her golden hair and his gentle eyes played among flowers that never faded. And though curses and betrayals had once frozen her world, Seraphina knew now that true love, forged in fire, tested by ice, could thaw even the deepest winter. They lived fiercely and freely, happily ever after.
This is a story of love that bloomed in misery, affection born from pain, and a betrayal that shattered everything. If you enjoy emotional and tragic stories, you're in the right place. Let's begin our journey. And do support the channel by liking, sharing, and subscribing, because creating such stories is a long and dedicated process.